All right, cool. What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Schmovie. This is episode number 299. My name is Steve. I'm one of three co-hosts. My other two co-hosts that are with me, as always, are...
I'm Ron.
And I'm John. Now, are we all
correct.
three co-hosts? Or
so.
are you the host and we're your co-host? Or is Ronald the host? Is this, like, is this one of those things?
I think it's equal. I think it's three. I think we three co-host together. That's at least how we tell everybody that that we try to get to give us access to their movies.
Yeah,
that we
co-host.
Yeah.
We're a three-headed host.
We're a three-headed monster. Is what we actually. That's what the email says. Is that we're a three-headed dragon.
We're
the one that got cut. Yeah, we got cut from Game of Thrones, but we exist and we are a thing. But yeah, thanks for tuning into a new episode of Schmovie. On today's episode, we're going to kind of go through some news items, some pretty big news items that we were excited to talk about earlier in the week. Kind of held some of the conversation for today's podcast, but the feature review that we're going to be going over today is a new movie called Profile, which is out today in theaters, where theaters are available to you. But before we get to the review, let's do some news, some items, maybe talk about a couple trailers that came out maybe, but what do you guys want to start with?
I want to start with something that's a real detour, but it should be a quick one.
Oh, great.
299 is the number of this episode.
It is.
Not only does that imply that a very momentous number is coming up, like right around the corner, but 299 conjures to me that $2.99 was the cost of an action figure when I was like in my prime action figure buying days. And I was just wondering, how much did action figures cost when you guys were in your prime action figure days? It just is a silly question, but I just wondered, was it still, was it like tacos? They kept it at around a certain price. It went up.
10 to 15. Cause I remember buying X-Men action figures. And actually when my mom used to work at the aquarium in Baltimore, I would like hang out with her because we didn't have babysitters sometimes. And I got her the Q character from Star Trek. I got it because she was obsessed with that character. My dog is actually named Bambi Q James. That was actually but yeah, I had a Q and I saved up all my money. It was like $10. And I was so proud of myself that I could give my mom an action figure to put above her desk as she worked. So
that's it. That's cool.
10 to 15.
See, well, I'm thinking specifically of the Star Wars and G.I. Joe figures that were like that was my shit when I was a kid, and $2.99 pretty much everywhere for like a Star Wars, but these are like the 4-inch figures. So when you talk 10-15, you might be talking like a 6 or 7 inch figure or some,
they're
still
pretty,
the small ones.
The
cool thing about that, there was a store called Zare that had them for $2.68.
Really?
And I would get $5 a week allowance, and my mom would go. A lot of times, it's like I felt like if I'd been really good, I could negotiate. My mom would float me the extra like 64 cents or whatever it was to get 2 G.I. Joes. On Friday. So I'd be rolling into that week and feeling pretty good.
What a childhood you had, John.
Those were the days, guys. Those were the days.
That's amazing.
What about you, Steve? Oh, sorry, Ronald. Continue.
No, go ahead.
I just didn't know what Steve's price range was.
I mean, I'd probably say it's somewhere. I was going to say somewhere around like $7 to $10. I feel like most of the ones I was buying, like of the ones that you described, John, were somewhere in that ballpark. Like, like they're maybe not as small as the Star Wars ones, but like all the like Ninja Turtle figurines I had, and like that early mid 90s, like that was probably the height for me. I want to say whether it was like, an allowance or just money from cutting the lawn or doing little odds and ends, like it either went to baseball cards or action figures. And, I feel like they were probably like that same kind of mental check where like, oh, I got $20. That equals maybe 2.8 characters I could buy at the store.
Right.
And then, you'd sweet talk mom or dad, like you just said, like, okay, let's make it happen. What else can I do to make this work? And then, make my day better.
And then there were those characters that they had like way too many of everywhere, and then the ones that you knew were hard to find. And it's like it was always, you knew some stores which is like, this place is only going to have a bunch of I don't know what the He-Man characters would have been, but it would have been like easy, there would have been something they always had, Beastman or something like that. But Trapjaw was harder to find. I remember that. What were you about to say, Ronald?
Related to that, okay, so so to supplement not being able to get new toys all the time, we go to like Goodwill and stuff like that to kind of fill in. Like she was just like, I'm not getting you. It was June, and I'm not getting any toys until December. So to the Goodwill we go, right? So I got a ton of Star Wars action figures, like the ones you're referring to, right? And I used to be a big Wizard Comics guy. Like, and you check the action figure values. And when I was in private school, a nun took my action figures. So like a year later, I got my Wizard magazine and I'm like looking through the values and I saw the ones that you're referring to. And Luke, who I had, went for like $5,000.
Hmm.
And that was out of the box. In the box was like 10.
Wow.
There was a hot second where people were actually paying those ridiculous, well, some collectors anyway, were actually paying ridiculous money for that stuff. Pretty soon that changed, but like there was just like with comics, there was a brief period where certain things were worth something because it was something from the era where people didn't know, that weren't treating it like a collectible. But as soon as you were in the era that people had heard you could make $5,000 on an action figure, suddenly everyone's keeping their shit nice. You know what I mean? And then it means that from that point on, especially if something comes out and says collector's item on it, it's like gold foil stamped. It's like, no. You're going to be the thing that everybody gets. There's, there's too many of you already for this to be worth anything. But that's how they got a lot of us. I luckily, I at least enjoyed I played with them until they fell apart, just like I read my comics until they fell apart to a certain extent. So I think there is this point of like, I did sort of want to keep things nice, but the battle of playing with them always won over the battle of like, keeping them pristine. So I was not a collector. I was a user and abuser of toys. I wasn't quite Sid, but I did have some. I did do some firecracker shit where I would put some firecracker under some moss, and I would like roll my GI Joe Jeep and time it so that it would hit when the
flip it over.
That's it would like knock it over. Yeah, that was nice. Fun as hell. And I don't think I ever actually broke any toys, but if I had, I would have been sad, and it would have been like, well, what do you think was going to happen? All right. Well, that was my fun little diversion. That was the toys that made us. The second.
Yeah, that's we gotta pitch that up part of the episode to Netflix. Where were we?
What was the news? We should talk about some Knives Out casting.
I mean, thankfully, even recording this episode, like there's more to talk about with Knives Out.
Yeah.
And by the time this comes out, there'll probably be even more.
Yeah, there will be more.
So many. So they've been announcing a ton of casting for Knives Out. Knives Out 2. And so Netflix is getting 2 and 3, correct?
Correct.
Huge. Yeah. So who did they announce that really got you guys super excited?
Well, Dave Bautista is a cool fit for Rian Johnson. You know what I mean?
So good.
And then Ed Norton is a cool fit for Rian Johnson. And is also a cool person to picture bouncing off of Dave Bautista. You know what I mean? And then they announced Janelle Monáe. Was that who they just announced?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's already like a pretty amazing cast that you can go, oh, wow, these people in this, not just in a drama, but in a world where it's a little bit heightened and it's a little bit, not quite campy, but it's fun. You can imagine what kind of part, like what kind of raging asshole Ed Norton's going to be playing. And maybe what kind of super cool guy Dave Bautista is going to be playing. And I'm wondering who all's coming back. Like I haven't heard anything about Lakeith Stanfield, but I'm kind of hoping, I don't know, somehow I think it would be cool to see him pop back up. But maybe Daniel Craig will be the only character that connects the movies. So
yeah. The funny thing about it all is that that announcement wasn't that long ago, and this episode is coming out on May 14th. And it's like, this is supposed to be filming. It starts filming in the rumors are in June. Like it's supposed to be this summer in Greece. But what I've read and awesome. what people have said seems to be like a June start date, which is super soon. And so that makes sense that, they're kind of doling these names out, these big names, literally one a day for the past couple of days. And I'm sure it'll continue, off and on over the next few weeks. But yeah, I mean, this is exactly what Netflix wants. This is that's what they put up whatever $400 million for, or whatever that reported amount was.
Yeah.
Is, this kind of splashy headline where the top headlines of every day of this week have been about their new movie, Knives Out 2. And it'll probably continue for at least a few more weeks until they go into production. And, this is good for them. It's good for Rian Johnson. It's good for everybody that gets involved with this, because I think everybody's excited to see what this is and what this franchise becomes. And not to mention, we didn't even say his name, but Daniel Craig is like a part of this too. And this is, in some ways his franchise, it seems, and that character's franchise. So even to say, the names that we just mentioned bouncing off of one another, you put Daniel Craig into it as Benoit, and it's like, it's just it's a cool idea, which is why I love the first movie, and I'm sure I'll love these movies, or at least I'm very excited to see them. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Knives Out 2 starts shooting this summer at some point, but we've got a pretty amazing cast already, and we're probably not even a third of the way through the names that they're going to drop.
Right.
Right.
Easily, probably at least like 5 or 6 more big names, which is insane.
Huge.
But
those are fun
man.
movies, man.
Yeah,
Those are fun movies.
I think it'll be a lot of fun.
I'm glad that there's no like CGI. It's just good storytelling, which could, which means that these movies probably have a pretty quick turnaround. They film in June, probably film for a month.
That's true.
Month
That's true.
Edit it, have it ready for the end of the year. So like, that's the fact that could maybe happen, or even January, February. That's nuts.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happened with the first one. Is that like the whole story around it was that like they had a really small window to make that movie before Daniel Craig made the new Bond, and or when it was kind of going in and out of directors and before they actually went to production on Bond,
right?
And so that happened during Knives Out. Like they did make that movie pretty fast, and it was ready pretty fast. So I mean, I don't know that they need to do that again, but it does seem to lend itself to what you're describing, which is like a movie that could go through production fast if they want this movie out in the next year or whatever it ends up being. So it'll be interesting to see how they turn that around.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I wanted to mention something real quick. We've been talking about this off and on over the last year, and it's something that obviously is not changing just because the world is getting better in some ways and theaters are opening back up. But there was a couple big announcements this week of some sales of feature films that went into production under one production company, one studio banner, and was sold to a different distributor, whether it's a streaming service or that has some sort of combination over the top and streaming service. But the first one was Mark Wahlberg, Antoine Fuqua's thriller called Infinite. That got sold to Paramount Plus, and that's I don't think they actually announced a date for it yet, but it's supposed to be sometime in June. It was supposed to come out in September, and they pulled it and sold it to Paramount Plus. And I think what studio was that? That was that was Paramount, but that was like they didn't sell it. I guess they kind of moved it over to that release. They didn't even put it in theaters at all. It's going to be a Paramount Plus exclusive. And then the other one was Sony sold their Cinderella kind of reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it, but it's the one that is Camila Cabello is the star who is starring as Cinderella in it, but they sold that to Amazon, so that's going to be coming out on Amazon again, kind of foregoing a theatrical release, becoming like an Amazon Prime Video exclusive. I don't know that one has a date yet. I want to say it was supposed to come out in theaters in July, so only a couple months off of its release, and it's coming on Amazon now. So it's just a really interesting thing because it's so unpredictable, like what movies are going this route, and which ones are going a route where like it's only streaming, or it is or it goes to a service that has like a day and date type of thing, like Disney Plus can do, or HBO Max can do, or anything like that. Or even like sort of like Netflix is starting to do it more and more with their stuff, like Army of the Dead, the new Zack Snyder movie that comes out next week. It's getting the widest Netflix theatrical release that any of their movies have gotten because of a deal with Cinemark to actually play it in a lot of theaters. So that's like a whole new hybrid for them too, to kind of get some of their movies in theaters, or at least ones that they think people will pay to go see in the theater. And that seems to be like one of them. But the other side of the coin is ones like this, where like you have a Cinderella remake, you have a Mark Wahlberg action movie, both completely foregoing a theatrical release and just going to streaming. So, I mean, any thoughts on that? Just thoughts on those movies in general. Have you heard of those? Have you been looking forward to either, or anything like that?
I wanted to, yes, I have heard of that, the Antoine Fuqua movie, Infinite. So there's a couple things I want to connect in all this. This has been a crazy week for Paramount Plus announcements. Yeah. One of them is that they announced that in 2022 they want to release an original movie every month for the entirety of 2022, right, which is kind of cool. I like that step. It feels like what HBO Max was kind of heading towards, which they were doing through the
Right.
like day and date thing. So that means that they're trying to be heavy duty competition for services like that. John Krasinski just got a first look deal with Paramount Pictures, and some of that stuff is supposed to be going into Paramount Plus. Ryan Reynolds got a Paramount deal for 3 years that is supposed to be funneling some of that stuff through Paramount Plus. So what that means to me is that they're trying to. You may not look at them as a contender right now, but if they hit you with a new movie for 12 months, you can't ignore that. And then if they start doing original TV shows and things like that more,
Right.
they're going to be a contender. So that's what that means to me in that respect. And I guess I have a question kind of bouncing off because of that. Is there a movie fire sale happening right now? Is that what it feels like? Does it feel like they're
Yeah.
just like yeah.
Or some variation of it. It's just like we talked about, like that backlog or like the bottleneck
Yeah.
of some of these movies that, you know, were pushed back over the last year, that maybe they just don't have the confidence, you know, of what's going to be released in theaters. You look at what's still coming out. It's a lot of the tried and true blockbusters or movies that are hitting, you know, very key into a time of the year or to a demographic that comes to see a movie of its kind, or whatever it is. It's just that, you know, some of these musicals are going to still be released, like not necessarily blockbusters in way anyway, but I mean, they have an audience that come to see movies like that. But like, you know, some of these ones that we're talking about is just, they kind of seem to be falling in that gray area of like untested franchises, like Without Remorse, another Paramount movie sold to Amazon. You know, it's just weird when you look over the year. Paramount is like the major one that has basically offloaded almost everything. You know what I mean? So looking at this, so The Lovebirds, Trial of Chicago 7 went to Netflix. United States versus Billie Holiday went to Hulu. Coming to America, the upcoming Chris Pratt movie coming out on July 4th weekend, The Tomorrow War, and Without Remorse all go to Amazon. So that's in, 9-10 months those were sold. Now they do have movies still coming out in theaters. They have Quiet Place 2, they have Jackass, they have Top Gun Maverick, some other kids movies like Clifford the Big Red Dog. Again, some kids movies they're going to still put in theaters. But it's just like a weird, like, I want to know what the equation is, or what's the algorithm for, like, why does, let's say, why does Without Remorse go to Amazon Prime, but Infinite goes to Paramount Plus? You know what I mean? Like, which ones are they deciding? Like, we said this about Coming to America. Like, why would they not have kept that in-house and use that to launch Paramount Plus? Because it came out the same week that Paramount Plus launched on Amazon Prime. So, like, the logic in some of this stuff is so weird to me. But you see this stuff just going out to random streamers that, like, that didn't have a lot of stuff in production themselves during the pandemic. So they're buying and they're probably overpaying for these things. And then you have these studios, like you're saying, like, we have 20 movies we need to release in the next year or two. And it's like, we can't release them all. We're going to lose money like crazy. So if we can sell it to someone, and get back our production budget and then maybe some back end stuff, like, that's what they're doing, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, John? What's your take on all this?
I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of like, I don't know what it means in the long term, because right now we're in this weird before zone where we're not really back to the way things are. So I think these choices that they're making, it almost seems like they're just sort of clearing the docket as much as they can. They're trying to get these movies, back on the calendar in some way, because they're hoping to move forward and continue to make new stuff. So it's a little bit like, I don't know. I mean, it every day it seems less like, it's, I don't know, the time that this is going to rage on. I mean, I'm in my waiting another week for my for my second shot to be in full effect, but I know a lot of people that are fully vaccinated and that are starting to kind of do stuff. So I don't know, it must be kind of a weird time for the studios to sort of try to figure out, like, how much should we expect less for these movies, and how much should we hope that we can just put them in front of people. But I think it still kind of makes them, like, this question of what's that window between theatrical and watching it at home, and what does that mean when a movie gets, for one thing, for a studio to sell stuff off. I mean, it's almost like there's 2 or 3 different issues going on there, but I think that issue is going to continue regardless of theaters being back in action and people going to see the movies out again. I think we still have kind of learned there's this extra hunger for seeing these theatrical movies at home as soon as possible, and the studios have realized they can still make a pretty good amount of money through their services. So I don't know, it kind of seems like they're trying a little bit of everything right now, but I don't know if I have a real strong opinion about it, like whether it's a trend that we can look at, or if it's just in a year it's going to seem like business as usual again. That right now they're kind of burning off some back catalog sort of.
I was thinking about how scary precise Netflix can reach out for a movie now. So they can say in December, men between 18 and 75 watch this type of movie at this point in the month. That is so scary how precise that information can get. So their purchases are so much more intricate than say like, somebody that's just trying to go for something. Like maybe Hulu will pick something up with the hopes that something that'll do well, like Nomadland. But like Netflix can set up a situation where everything may not win something at the Academy Awards, but it will definitely win the hearts of people. They figured out a cool algorithm based on hours and hours and hours and hours.
They have a lot of information about our viewing habits and like.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
So if they go into the market looking for army film about a 25-year-old man that, that's what they like. They like this. So let's buy 3 of those things and then let's put them out. It's crazy.
And we know the second week of June is when this movie is going to perform the best,
Yes, man.
No, it's true. Like it's weird though how Netflix. We've talked about how they still seem. I mean, it's changing because so many. It's the line is blurring between like what's a Netflix movie and what's a theatrical movie. But it's still, occasionally you feel that different development process. But I feel like that is even changing. That Netflix doesn't seem that different, at least not from the other providers that we're talking about right now in terms of the kind of content that, like Without Remorse, the fact that would have been a theatrical movie, it felt kind of TV sized to me somehow when I was watching it. There were a few scenes that felt like they would have, that would have really benefited from being seen on the screen, but it kind of felt like it would have, I don't know. That movie seems to me like it would have felt like a mid-level blockbuster in terms of what's on screen, the kind of action that you're getting. So I wasn't even sure that wasn't kind of made as an Amazon movie. So when I heard that was acquired the way that it was, I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's hard to know how well some of these movies would be doing if they weren't coming out in this very user-friendly way. But no, it's got to be crazy though. All this like the forecast of how much money they're expecting to make, all that was just growing and growing and growing over the last few years, and then it just kind of burst. So like who knows what's going to be that first movie to make $1 billion again, or to get back up to those crazy numbers that we were hearing. It almost seems like it was destined to pop in some way. It was destined to change, and the way we grade these things was destined to change. But no, as far as my opinion, I always listen to what you guys are saying, and then I basically synthesize your 2 opinions into a slightly new opinion.
That's great. It works. So one of the ones, so there's a couple trailers that came out. I just wanted to mention this week.
Yes.
We don't really talk too much about trailers anymore, but there's a couple really good ones. But the first one was another one that Sony produced that they sold to Netflix, which is Kevin Hart's Fatherhood, which I think is going to be a huge movie for Netflix.
Huge.
It's going to be massive, and I actually think it looks really good, and I've heard that it's very good. But that movie just seems like a 4-quadrant. People were going to just eat this movie up, and their production, their promotion of it just seems right down the middle. And the trailer's really good. And I just think like this is you talk about Netflix, like they know what to do and when to do it. And it seems like, oh well, let's talk about a movie called Fatherhood for Father's Day, starring Kevin Hart, to everybody that has our service. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of people watching this movie. A lot of people.
And then you'll like the movie and you're like, man, that Kevin Hart's a funny guy. Oh, we have all of his specials here. Right here for you to watch
right now.
Right after you watch it. And then everything is kind of rewarding itself. And plus, this looks like the first Kevin Hart movie that everybody's going to universally say is a good movie. Because I think he's been in this sweet spot of like shitty movies where he's just been making kind of middle of the road movies that people have not hated or really loved. And I think that this is going to be the one that may separate him. And for it to be on Netflix, accompanied by his specials that he's, exclusively putting out through Netflix.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. Like Father's Day is going to be huge for him.
I think so.
Huge.
Do you notice who wrote it?
Yeah. No, who wrote
it? It's kind of interesting.
I saw it pop up.
Well, I mean, it's directed by and co-written by Paul Weitz of the Weitz brothers. But the screenplay is co-written by Dana Stevens, the film critic for Slate forever, and really for a long time ago was one of my favorite critics. I think she kind of phased out of writing reviews a lot, but she also used to be on the Slate Culture Gab Fest, which was a podcast. I don't even know if it still runs anymore, but she was just how you have those couple 3 movie critics who you go, this person's not just blowing smoke. She was like kind of an artsy critic, but she would occasionally dig in and vouch for some popcorn fare. So she just seemed to me like a legit film lover. So I don't know. It's always to me interesting when a critic lays it on the line and writes a movie. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. So that's very interesting. That's another thing that indicates this is, I mean, Kevin Hart has the ability to put any number of movies into action as a producer, and some of those movies could be some of those kind of lowbrow quickie comedies, but he's a talented guy, so of course he can act. He could be he's just like any number of those really funny actors that find the right drama or comedy drama for them, and it could really connect. So there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be in something legit as well. But I don't know, that's just one more thing that makes it sound kind of interesting, is that someone with a lot to risk if this movie sucks, being a film critic.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I was interested before that. I did not see the trailer, so I was looking at the Wikipedia page to see what's up with this movie. But the cast is pretty fucking awesome. So
it looks really good, actually.
Yeah, it looks good, man. I teared up a little bit watching the trailer. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, me too. When he gives her the kiss in bed.
Yes,
and he says, "Here's 2, one from your mother and one from me." Man, I was like, "Oh no, don't do this to me! I can't do it. Can't do it."
When a trailer gets you, there's some shit going on.
Yeah,
that means the movie is just going to be like,
they're gonna
fuck. I mean, yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's the little kid from Them who is like a force on that show, man. So like, I know it's going to be really good. At least
should I be watching Them? By the way, is them pretty solid?
Them is heavy, man. I feel weird talking like them is heavy. Them is heavy.
I know. What I said is them pretty
hard
solid.
to watch. It's hard to watch.
It's hard to watch, man. Like I've been taking breaks. It's like racism is at an all-time crazy high in life, and then it's an all-time high in our media. Underground comes out Friday, or tomorrow. Underground Railroad comes out Friday, and Barry Jenkins' next offering.
So yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Ronald, because I was just curious, because we've talked in the past about sort of wearying of like Civil War narratives and slave narratives and stuff like that. But here's Barry Jenkins, who's somebody who I think we can trust to do something really interesting and kind of magical and cinematic with the story. I just didn't know how you were feeling about that. I can confirm the book it's based on is really interesting and kind of quasi fantastical. It's got elements that are not fully grounded, but it's not fully supernatural. So it's interesting. It's a little bit of like alternate history almost, if they stick to the book. I was just wondering, how interested you are in seeing that. It looks really good, but it also looks like more suffering,
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm like exhausted a little bit from like trauma, on screen. I was like about to watch. So I think that like Netflix has cornered the market for Black trauma. I mean, it's like Monster and all these movies that are coming out that are great, like critically acclaimed and all this stuff. But it's just people getting murdered and killed by police and locked up for 20 years, and that bothers me.
Yeah.
So I tend to lean towards the stuff that's a little more like normal, a little more like day to day. Hey, this person's having a good day, but it's not.
I want to see that movie.
Available.
You convinced me. That sounds great.
It's not readily available with Black people in it, man. Like there's a film that Brian Tyree did that's like a rom-com that I want to check out. It's called, where the heck is it? It's called The Outside Story. And that kind of stuff I've been trying to embrace more than the trauma stuff that I've been seeing a ton of. So, I mean, long story short, I'll probably watch the pilot of The Underground, because I know that it's like the Underground Railroad is actually like an actual subway. Like it's actually
that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit. It's a literal railroad underground in the story. So I mean, it's got that element of fantasy, which is like, you know, some people might say they want that even less in this type of story, but it is trying to do something different than other narratives of its type. But like I said, I enjoyed the book, and the fact that it's Barry Jenkins, I'm very intrigued. But you know, I can't pretend to have the same feelings about it that you do, but I am similarly like that kind of narrative. I just kind of feel like it's hard to watch and then appreciate the cinematic aspect of it when it's like it's such a button pushing thing, you know, to see that kind of suffering and that content displayed.
It's exhausting, man. Like I always opt out of it, to be honest with you. But like, you know, if a good one comes along, I'll check it out. But like, is there a good one? Is it? I mean, and by that I just mean like, can I come out of this not feeling like my heart's being ripped out of my chest? You know, and that's the way Them made me feel. Like I've had minor versions of things like that happen in my life, and I'm actually going through this phase where I'm like in a new neighborhood and having my existence being questioned at every turn. Like, you live here? Oh my goodness, this can't be you know, you have to do something. Like, was this given to you? Like, people are asking me nuts questions. I don't live in a mansion. I live in a house. I live in a regular house. The houses around me cost more. And somehow I like being questioned at every moment feels like Them, almost like a slightly less aggressive version of Them, without blackface people just dancing around as ghosts. So like, you know, that's a.
I'm glad about that, at least.
Yeah,
that's
can
not.
You imagine? Can you imagine? But yeah, man, I'm probably gonna give the pilot a look, and then I'm a little exhausted.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking, though, man. Like that's a good question. I feel like that's something that people don't really try to get into the heads of people that have to.
Well, Barry Jenkins is also one of our guys, kind of. So it's like we would normally be like saying, "Oh, yes, this is it." And I was like, "Oh, this." I was just wondering if that was a conflict, because I know we've talked about it before, and I know you in particular have said it almost doesn't matter how good you hear it is. It's just like, do you want to, you know, is it worth being dragged through those thoughts and those feelings? You know, are they doing anything new with it? You know, and I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll see, man. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll watch it and, you know, talk about it on the show if it's worth talking about. But yeah. And it starts this weekend, right? Or did it?
Yeah. Starts this Friday, I think.
Yeah.
So it's when the podcast comes out today.
All right.
Anything else? But before we get to the review, hold on. Before we get to the review, just the other trailers I wanted to mention.
Oh yeah,
so everybody can find them. We can just breeze through these. So we'll just be like, we want to see this or no.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
The Green Knight.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the new trailer?
Yes. Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
The final trailer for A Quiet Place 2.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen
I did not see that yet. I didn't see the final trailer yet.
Final trailer's great. Can't wait to see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the real one that came out at the beginning of the week that really got the most buzz is Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Man, it looks really fun.
It really does.
It looks like they worked out the tone that, like, and I did not see the first one, but I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, oh, what is this? And I heard people talking about it. It's got funny moments and it's got kind of violence and sudden moments that are like putting it in this different zone for this type of movie. And that Tom Hardy seemed to be having a little fun and all that stuff. And so I was like, okay, I'll check it out at some point. And then my son saw it at a sleepover and came back and said, Dad, it's pretty cool. You know, you might like it. But they had fun with it. And I was like, okay, a couple of 13-year-old boys liked it. So maybe I'll like it. And then I saw this trailer and I was like, I guess I should go back and watch that movie just because it looks like that what they're doing with this looks like, okay, they've settled on a take on this character and the way that it works with the world that just,
Right.
it was really funny to me, just the stuff that was in the trailer. But even beyond that, I thought that the origin of the villain we get looks really insane and cool. And Woody Harrelson seems to be having fun, and it's always a good sign to me when Woody Harrelson is in something that seems to be having fun.
Definitely.
So I don't know. And also it's Andy Serkis directing, so I think we can expect the mocap, for whatever that means, we can at least expect that stuff to be well imagined, and for the potential of what can be done with this type of storytelling to be, to be visually imagined. And it actually did look kind of cool. It made me think, okay, I hope this works out for Andy Serkis.
It looks good. Like the actual creature effects, like look, the brief shots that you get of Carnage, like look really good. Like, and I was going to tell you guys, I didn't mention it on our thread, but there's a video that came out along with the trailer. I guess it's on Sony's YouTube page, but it's Andy Serkis like breaking down the trailer, and
oh wow,
it's really good. It's really good, and just like you can just hear like how much fun he had making the movie, and like he's really excited for people to watch the movie. So just like we all like him a lot. Like he's a we're fans of his on this podcast. So yeah, like the mentioning of him getting to direct this, and the insight that he has into whatever the mocap elements of this movie are. But I mean, even just like the creature performances and like what that stuff looks like and what can be done with digital effects, like has had his hand in some way in some of the best that there's ever been. So, for a comic book movie called Venom, Let There Be Carnage, like it is what it is, but it does seem like he had a blast making the movie. So check that video out if you can track it down. It's literally like a shot for shot breakdown of the trailer with the director, Andy Serkis. That's worth checking out.
No, that sounds cool. I like him.
Yeah, very, very cool. I think that was the only other, those were the three I wanted to mention, but a lot of cool trailers came out this week just before we recorded, so thought we could mention them.
Should we do like a trailer roundup soon?
I think so.
Or something? It's always fun when we do that. Like I think at this point there's starting to be enough stuff to get excited about. So.
Yeah, I love talking about trailers, and so we should start doing that more often. Okay, cool. So let's just do a little review of the feature movie for this week. This is coming out today in theaters. This is a movie called Profile, directed by Timur Bekmambetov, which most people probably know from Day Watch, Night Watch, maybe Wanted. Those movies are probably the most mainstream films that he's
Abraham
had.
Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Sure, that too. But he's kind of been really involved in this whole this screen life genre or subgenre of movies, and they have definitely developed and kind of deployed this production means of making these things look the way they look. And I think he's also a producer on Searching and Searching 2, so he's got his hand in these kinds of movies. But this movie basically, I don't know, do you want to talk about it, synopsis, John? I don't want to dominate the conversation, but do you want to break it down?
Oh, I guess we would say that if those movies you've mentioned are kind of in the vein of thriller or straight thriller or supernatural thriller, we've seen,
right.
And this one is more like political thriller kind of, but it also goes with that sort of real world horrors aspect, in that there's a few points in this where what it's depicting, the kind of surprises around the corner of what's happening on screen, are very much like the sort of surprises that happen in one of the straighter horror films like Unfriended or something like that, where it's like, but it's more grounded. And I would say if that's something this movie has a tougher time with, is because it is trying to be more real world and more grounded. I think when it does get to the more ridiculous aspects, I mean, Searching had this, all of them have had that point somewhere in the third act. Things have to take a turn and they amp things up, and you have to kind of go with, it's like found footage movies do this too. At some point you have to go with the fact that someone's still filming. At some point you have to go with the fact that someone's doing so much of this through the phone or saying what they're saying out loud or whatever. I feel like this movie kind of, because it was trying to be rooted in such real world stuff, when it gets to the more heightened aspects of it, it I don't know, it felt a little bit schlocky or something to me. But I mean, as far as the technique of telling the story this way through all the interactions, all the stuff I just said, the way clicking on a message can kind of be like a shock. I think this movie, it's almost like funny in a strange way that he's had a hand in 2 or 3 of these, and he's making one now, as though they're really just saying this is a straight up subgenre now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think it has some moments of tension. It has some little character beats that work, and it has some people that maybe you'll kind of like. And I think ultimately it's a little bit like it didn't quite blow me away, but I do think that idea of, well, a journalist who's kind of catfishing a terrorist, or a journalist who's going undercover in this way. I told you we binged Catfish. I see everything through the filter of Catfish recently. My wife was watching an episode of Hoarders, and I was like, why don't they just have one? I just want to see Neve pop in and see what he thinks of these hoarders.
That show is so good, man.
Anyway, but like, so I don't know. There's something about it that does feel very plausible, and then there's those little moments where it just feels it's got some movie-ish stuff that happens. Like, for instance, when she creates her new identity, like within minutes, she's in with this relationship with this guy. There's obvious reasons. I mean, in the story, you might look at the reasons why some of these things are seemingly easy for her, but I don't know. I mean, I think it kept me going the way a lot of thrillers do, kind of pot boilers, where you can't help but be engrossed by how things get worse and worse. But it kind of felt like her decision, like she seemed like kind of a bad journalist, and like her decisions were incredibly impulsive. And I know there's supposed to be sort of a head versus heart thing going on for her character, but I don't know if for me that really translated, because we're still talking about a terrorist. It's like her boyfriend's kind of dull and pushy, and then it's a terrorist. So like this idea that she's kind of tempted by this other life that she's dipping into and going undercover. I don't know if I quite bought all that. I don't know. I've said a lot. What do you think, Steve, about any of that stuff I said?
I pretty much agree. I feel like I'm a little more positive on the movie than maybe you are, but I'm right there. I mean, I think that's probably the piece that I would criticize the most, is just like the buying, like the glamour of like what pulls her in so quickly to this world, that this ISIS recruiter that she's has this relationship with online, and how quickly that develops. I mean, and granted, this is a movie that's like an hour and 40 minutes. It moves pretty quick. I mean, it's if anything, maybe it's a little long, but I mean, like, I think that part of it does feel like the biggest leap that you have to take, and just go for it if you want to follow the story. But in general, though, I feel like I kind of was in on like how desperate this character was to have a story and to get a story. And like, I feel like even when you kind of get peppered in with a lot of her personal stuff, and like kind of how that is kind of in turmoil in different ways, both, financially, and where she is in her personal relationships, and, where her boyfriend wants it to go and where she wants it to go. Like, so those things kind of mixing with the allure and the glamour happening when she's talking to this recruiter in these social media and these Skype videos. I mean, to a point, I'm kind of in on it. Like, I kind of get it, or I'm along for this.
You're kind of
ride,
with it.
I guess. Yeah, I'm with it. But then it kind of jumps a pretty big leap. But I mean, I think that's what they're trying to say about what's happening, and this idea that they're recruiting all of these, these British women that, see something better there for them, and they don't see what's really happening there, because they're kind of only being shown what they want to see. They want them to see. And, like you said, there's a point, like, when we get to our third act in these kinds of movies, something has to happen to kind of kick it in. And a lot of it is convenient, but, and kind of what kind of informs her what's really happening without, I guess, spoiling anything. But, her resources are very convenient to like kind of let her know what's going on.
Yeah.
But in general, though, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, honestly, like I was pretty into it the whole time. And I felt very uncomfortable, like at times, watching, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but like watching her think that she's fooling him when, really it's like, she's absolutely being fooled. You know what I mean? Like it's that whole idea of like this journalist who thinks she's got a one over on this guy. And, when the moment happens and you see what's going on, it's just really uncomfortable. And, and you would think someone that's not even half of as intelligent as she is, maybe, or as crafty as she is, maybe, getting themselves into this situation also, which you hear about this in the movie, examples of like other girls that have gone through this and what have happened to them. You can really quickly see like how they basically traffic these women in and out of these ISIS training camps and like what they do with them, and it's really scary.
And
so
that
that's
part's very real world too, and that's
yes,
the part
and
that this movie
it's very scary.
Is rooted in, like, you know, the kind of rip from the headline sort of aspect of some of that stuff. So it does.
Yeah,
I think you're right that the genuine suspense and sort of the twists and turns and the kind of, well, like I said, just the technique of guiding you through the story in this way that feels very relatable and feels very personal, and I would say also making it scary to be sitting at home on a computer when the stuff that you're scared of is miles away, and the people
absolutely.
you're scared of is, you know, at least potentially are miles away. That stuff is palpable. I do think they do a good job of that whole idea of, you know, making it, you know, how it kind of seeps into her life, even though she's where she, you know, she's at home while this is all happening.
Sure.
So
yeah, there's also like another element of it that I thought was really, and it's not even really unique to the whole idea of like the ISIS recruitment that this movie is really trying to explore. But I mean, just the idea of like online relationships and online like anonymity, you know, and a true lack of it, you know, with today's tools that are out there and the way technology works. It just, that itself in this story is very uncomfortable to watch and kind of scary. When you think about what people do online and you know, the protections that they think they have in certain efforts that they make to be anonymous or to be someone else. And, you know, you pick up on things like, you know, I may have joined this thing with a different name and that's who you think I am. But like, if you really wanted to know, you could see things in my background. You could see things in all the videos that you have with me. And that stuff is really scary. Like the social engineering stuff, you know, how they do that hacking is very scary and it's very real. And I know people who do that for a profession, and it's, that stuff is wild. So to see it in the context of this kind of like journalistic attempt to get a story and how that story might turn around on her is, I thought was pretty interesting. But in general, I was pretty into this movie, so it's something that I would definitely recommend checking out. You know, especially there's not like a lot coming out right now. So I mean, like it is one that's trying to have a release. I don't know, you know, when it'll be on video on demand if you want to wait for that option, but I would definitely recommend checking it out. Just in general, I like these screen life kind of movies. Like I'm in on Searching, the Unfriended movies. Like I'm kind of in on all these because I just think it's kind of innovative and different. But I don't know. And you didn't get to check it out, Ronald, right? So like we're basically selling it. We're trying to sell it to you, basically.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think of the kind of stakes in those screen life movies? As we've said, we've seen, you know, my favorite of them all is still Host. I know that that's maybe not quite the same format, but I do think Host is and I know it's a horror film. And I do think like this movie is, like I said before, it's a good test case for, let's not do a horror, let's do something else, but let's still have those feelings of like the pulse pounding excitement of like the story that you're being led through. It has some horror. It almost teeters into horror in that last act. But how do you feel just in general, not having seen this, Ronald, but about those sort of movies that use social media and also I think benefit from using the real apps and the real, you know, it really looks like the screen that you're at home. You might be compelled to click on your mouse while you're watching the fucking movie because it's so, especially if you watch it on your computer, as we did this screener, as I did.
Zoom, Host using Zoom and the way the realism of that, and just Host is the best one I've seen. I say Searching is a close second. I love the pacing of Searching, but Host just took me by surprise in a way that I just couldn't handle. Honestly, it was pretty amazing. So I've seen really good versions of those, and I've seen really bad. I saw one that was like a Facebook. Somebody died and started appearing on Facebook, and
oh, I remember that one. What was that?
Yeah,
was that one of the Unfriended? Or
I think that was Unfriended. I think that was one of the Unfriended.
Or the sequel to it, maybe
the newer Unfriended.
Maybe,
and then, you know what I realized? Like I thought that the authenticity of it, of just really using Facebook, would entertain me, but no. It really just is driven by how well the story's told. So if this story's told well and it's done, you know, fairly realistically, I'm in. I love them. I'm really a big fan of them. This doesn't feel like a genre that's been worn out yet. This doesn't feel like found footage. You know, it felt like every movie was found footage for like a year or two for a while.
Right.
This doesn't feel like that so much. Like
Right.
this feels like a
Yeah.
genre that's still budding. We watched did you see the Romeo and Juliet one, Steve, at South by Southwest?
The R&J.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I like that way more than I thought that I would. And
Yeah.
that was a cool version of it too. So
Yeah.
like this feels like a budding genre. I'm very excited to see what this movie's about. Like I really wanted to see it, unforeseen circumstances prevented it, but I like those movies a lot. So
I think you'd like it. I think you'd like
Yeah,
it.
I mean, it's
Okay.
like, and honestly, even with my criticisms, with me saying like, oh, it's a thriller that gets a little off the rails in the third act. It's like there's a lot of really solid thrillers that you could say that about. That, like
Yeah,
that's
true.
where they
Yeah.
that's where they have to keep upping the ante. And also, I think for me, it's what you were talking about, Steve, too, and at least what you confirmed about what I was saying, which is like that. I think if I got bumped by anything, it was by like, okay, are we supposed to think this character is smart, or are we supposed to think that she's impulsive? And I think that whole idea of she's tripping over her feelings
Yeah.
is kind of the character note that's supposed to make us buy that stuff. And your ability to go along with that and to vouch for a character who's acting that way will depend on how much you like the way the movie resolves. But I think even in that section where it was becoming implausible, it still has that, again, the kind of creep factor of just, I don't know. And I actually, I thought some of the stuff in Unfriended was effective, because I think that idea of who could be on the other end of a chat, who could be, especially that, that face, that no avatar person that pops up.
Yeah.
I think that's just a creepy idea, that notion of the unknown presence that's out there, or what's really happening. But I think this movie made an effective use of specifically a kind of us knowing, as you said, Steve, that we're seeing the gap between where she is in her understanding and what's really happening. We're seeing that kind of grow. And I do think that is like, it makes for some really, like, it's nerve wracking. And I think that's what this movie is trying to do, is just kind of twist it and tighten the screws until it gets to the end. So,
yeah. So that's out today in theaters, Focus Features. I don't know what their theatrical window is. If you're not comfortable going to theater still, it'll be in some video on demand option at some point in the near future. But if you're comfortable going to see a movie in the theater and it's available, where you live, or, it's definitely something I would probably recommend checking out. It's a really interesting movie. And I don't know what else he has coming up next, but he does seem to be doing a lot of these kinds of movies. And again, I think he's kind of at the forefront of the technology that they use to make them. And we should have when we had Anish on the show, I wish we could have talked to him more about searching, because I watched a video like in how he mentioned it a little bit in our interview with him, which you can find on our YouTube channel or on a prior episode of the podcast. But like the way they edit these movies and they shoot these scenes, like, are just, it's so fascinating. There's a video on YouTube that he put out when Searching came out, basically showing how much editing went into making this screen life thing look real, or look edited together. With stuff they did with like John Cho and like, it's just really, really wild, like how they do this kind of thing to make it look real. So yeah, it's really interesting. But
well, that's one way it's different from found footage, right? Because found footage is like, you can see how easy it would be to run around and have bad photography and just put it together. Sure. This, you actually have to go in and animate all, even if it's an obvious transition or something, you have to animate that. It's not just shooting a computer screen while someone clicks
exactly around. Yeah, it's really cool stuff. And I don't know, you should check that video out if that sounds interesting at all. It was a video for Searching again, that Anish Shiganti put out. Is there anything else you guys want to mention on the podcast today that you saw quickly, or just as a brief mention before we wrap this up?
Ronald, anything you've watched recently?
No, but I did want to mention that the movie that we saw at South by Southwest, Together, the small indie film that got picked up, is now on video on demand. So if you want to check out a good film that's like has a lot of heart.
Is that the Ed Helms one?
Yeah, Ed Helms and Patty Harrison.
I wanted to check that out. I missed that. I want to see that.
Yeah. It's on PVOD right now. So like, if you want to check it out, if you didn't get a chance to see it at South by, this is a good film that'll, entertain you, make you tear up a little bit. And the dynamic between Patty and Ed is so good, man. This kind of breathes new life into his career to me. Like, I feel like Ed Helms, is kind of miscast sometimes. You know, and I feel like this is a perfect role for him.
Cool. Check that out. Anything else from you, John?
I watched the Sons of Sam series doc, whatever that is, on Netflix. I don't know when that came out, but I feel like I saw people talking about it around the time
last
I
week.
watched it. So it must have been relatively new. I mean, it kind of was like it's 4 episodes, I think. It's sort of like the best and the worst of this genre in a strange way, because it ultimately feels like one of those. You know, you ever watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries or any unsolved show, and you're getting towards the end and you realize like, oh wait, this is unsolved. No wonder this is like they can ratchet it up as much as they want. They're never going to tell us anything, you know. This whole thing, it's about a guy. I think his name is Maury Terry. I might be getting his name wrong, but I think his name was Maury Terry, who was a writer and a journalist who had evidence around the time of the Son of Sam killings, or at least his theory was that David Berkowitz did not act alone, basically, and that he was part of a cult, a satanic cult. Now this was around the time of like the, you know, America was going into the satanic panic years. So there was a lot of talk of satanic cults and things that didn't really bear out, but there were actually occasionally things that happened in groups that did some creepy things, and also like extremist kind of cultish groups. A lot of times those kind of, you know, the idea of like Satanism, which in real life is kind of like a free will sort of thing. Most Satanists are about free will rather than like evil, but like pretending to be evil is part of the, I mean, I'm probably getting all this wrong. A real Satanist would probably correct me, but the idea of using what's going to like throw society off or confuse people, that's kind of like the game of it, is like, it's not about being evil as much as it is about just flipping everything over, you know? And so you can imagine how, and they say in this documentary that could lead to, in its most extreme practices, like personal freedom and people having all this expression and, you know, drugs and sex and everything piling in, some bad things can happen. So it's not like satanic panic being kind of an alarmist thing means that nothing bad ever happened because of cults. But so we just don't know. And this movie kind of hits at that paranoia about cults and gets into some pretty creepy imagery and ideas about what might have been this cult that David Berkowitz was part of or was in the thrall of. And they don't ever quite tilt it over. They don't really show compelling evidence that makes it provable, but it's pretty convincing that something more was going on than just this one guy. And then the documentary kind of doesn't have anywhere to go, because you know that nothing ever came of it. And it's about a guy who it kind of ends up being more the story of this man, Maury Terry, and his obsession with it and how he let it kind of affect his life. So it's a little bit like something that would have been on A&E that would have been an hour long, you know, 25 years ago or something, but it's a nicely made 4-hour show. And it does get into some interesting stuff, but ultimately I felt like, oh, that was entertaining because it was creepy. And it kind of reminded me of when conspiracy theories were fun to think about and to hear about. But, you know, ultimately it's just more murder. So it's kind of like what you're saying, Ronald, about all the trauma. It's like at some point, you know, it's another one of those. But I don't know. I think if people want that extra little creep factor thrown in with their true crime, this one, at least the first couple episodes it's got some really, really, really creepy ideas being expressed in it. But ultimately it doesn't seem to, it doesn't seal the deal and say this was actually happening. It's more like, oh, this really sad, desperate, obsessed guy thought this was happening. So I don't know if that's really that much of a story. But anyway, it's well made and entertaining. Did you watch it, Steve, by any chance?
I have not yet. I have it in my queue. I haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah, you might like it. I'd like to hear what you think.
I definitely want to. I just wanted to mention real quick, there's a couple, we didn't get to talk about it on the podcast. I know you saw it, Ronald, but the Netflix movie Stowaway, I wanted to mention. I thought that was actually pretty good, actually. I like that quite a bit. That's Anna Kendrick, Toni Collette, Daniel Day Kim. I had no idea, even like I didn't even watch the trailer for it. I just kind of watched it because it was like I heard you said you watched it, and I'd heard from a couple people that they liked it, but I thought it was pretty good. That's on Netflix. And then TV shows, I've been watching Mighty Ducks Game Changers on Disney Plus, and it's so good. It's so good. Anybody that likes the Mighty Ducks movies, definitely recommend this series to you. And then I finally caught up. I'm almost done season 1 of For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus. And damn it, that show is good. Like I'm way behind on that. Oh my God. I'm way behind on that show. And I only kind of got my act together because like the second season has already come out. And like a lot of articles I was reading was just saying like it's gotten amazing reviews, especially the second season. And just saying that it's like low key beyond maybe Ted Lasso, like the show that Apple has that is like the like great show. And I'm on the final episode of season 1 right now. The 10 episode seasons. It's great, man. It's gorgeous. It's such a cool idea. Like basically, what if we never got to the moon first? What if the space race never ended? What if it went decades? What if, a different Kennedy was president? Like that revisionist history kind of stuff. Just really cool stuff happening in the show. And I just wanted to recommend that. If anybody out there hasn't checked it out yet or was thinking about it, that's 2 seasons of that are out on Apple TV Plus right now. That's For All Mankind it's so good so far. So yeah, those are kind of what I'm watching right now. So yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it. That's enough. That's a lot. That's plenty.
It is.
That's enough to give away.
Ronald, you got to get back to watching like 18 things that we haven't heard of.
He's getting his house built, John.
I know.
He's getting the house finished.
He's a busy man.
I'm gonna give you guys a tour. So
he's got to get a carpet in that room.
Yes, to absorb some of that sound. That's fuck.
All around the walls and the ceiling.
Yeah. Your whole room would just be a carpet, like the furry walls from Give Me a Greek.
Glue action figures on the walls. They'll break up the sound in an interesting way.
Cool. Okay.
Now,
so $2.99 is in the books. That means the next special episode is going to be episode 300. John talked about it earlier. I think sort of we were getting there.
I alluded to counting and how the next number up is an exciting number.
It's going to be a don't miss. Like it's a very special episode. Comes out next week. 10 years of Movie Schmovie, 300 episodes plus. But we had some special guests join us for the episode to go over a really fun topic to kind of cap off a decade of this podcast that we all love doing. So please, especially next week, tune in to episode 300. You can find us at movieschmovie.com. And from there, you can, basically jump into any podcast platform that you prefer to use. And if they offer an option for you to review the podcast or share it out to a friend or family member, it would be great if you could do that. We'd really appreciate it. And if you leave a review or a star rating, like on Apple, if that's a possibility, wherever you are, if it's not Apple, we thank you in advance. What else? Anything else? youtube.com/movie. Hit that up, subscribe, hit the bell to get alerted. Some people prefer watching videos and listening to podcasts. You could do that too. All these episodes are coming out there the same day that the podcast drops. And we have a special side thing on the YouTube channel called Schmarvel, where we're kind of going over different shows, different movies as they come out that Marvel Studios is putting into the world. And we just kind of finished going through the seasons of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We're going to be talking about MODOK, the new Hulu series coming up here on another episode. And then once Loki kicks off in June on Disney Plus, we'll be back at it on a weekly basis, recapping those episodes. And again, that's only on YouTube. That is not in the podcast feed. So if you want to check that out, if you're a fan of Marvel, subscribe there so that you get those alerts.
Or if you're a fan of Schmovie, I mean, come on, you could hate Marvel and just be a Schmovie completist.
That's true. You got to see it all, and you got to see that. Then that's got to
one day
that completes the set
that we create on that show. Will be bleeding back into this show, and people will be like, "What's all this talk about Aunt May? What the hell is happening?"
Oh man. Yeah, it's gonna be it. That's it for this episode. Thank you for listening, and as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
All right, cool.
So you guys want to take a quick break and then do Marvel Schmarvel? Like, or are you guys fine to just roll through?
I'm ready to roll.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
let's roll.
Do you need to break the video?